Hi, my name is Gabe from Google. I am a program manager on the Applied Digital Skills team, as well as a former educator, and I'm here to lead us through a subject-specific webinar on our English, language arts, and social studies curriculum, and how to integrate that with applied digital skills. So back when I was a teacher, I taught ninth grade and sixth grade and seventh grade English, language arts, and social studies. And I wish I had a program like Applied Digital Skills that could help me integrate technology in the classroom in a meaningful way. So if you need to access the site, you will find it in the bottom corner of your screen at g.co/applieddigitalskills. All right, moving right along. Our goal for this session is to help you identify the ways that you can use applied digital skills lessons in your classroom this year. We know sometimes that is easier said than done, and so we're going to try to make that a little bit easier for you today. Real quickly, just a little housekeeping before we get the session started. If you're an existing applied digital skills user, we want you to switch to student for a moment so that you can log your attendance in this webinar. And so go ahead to your classes section and then go to my profile. You'll see that on the bottom left-hand side. And then you'll see that option to switch to student, okay? Once you switch to student, all right, it's gonna take you to the student section of classes. You'll see that change in the top right-hand corner. Go ahead and click that button that says Join Classes in the top left-hand corner of the screen, all right? Once you do that, you'll see a window pop up that says Join Class, and I want you to enter the class code that you're seeing on the screen right now, GYFVFG. That's the class code for this course, okay? Now again, that lets me know that you are joining our webinar today. However, when you're doing this in the classroom, you would have your students go through that exact same process, okay? You would create a class that generates a class code, and that is the class code that they will type in when they are joining your class, okay? Now, if you are brand new to Applied Digital Skills and your students are brand new to Applied Digital Skills, they're going to go to this sign up button, top right-hand corner of the homepage for Applied Digital Skills. Okay, once they hit that, they're going to select a role, and they're going to choose the role as learner. Okay, and for your purpose of joining this webinar, you're also going to hit the role learner. All right, and then eventually you'll also be prompted to join a specific class, all right, and enter the class code. And again, it's that one at the top of your screen, GYFVFG. That's the class code for this webinar, all right? Excellent. Feel free to rewind if you need to join that class, but we're going to move right along. Most important thing to remember, whether you're new or an existing teacher, at the end, be sure to go ahead and switch back over to teacher, okay? That's going to be in the My Profile section. You can switch over to teacher from the student account type, all right? That way you can continue to use Applied Digital Skills as an instructor, okay? So why are we doing this? Why are we promoting Applied Digital Skills, this free video-based curriculum on digital literacy and computational thinking? It's really simple. It's because we believe that every teacher in a school deserves to have access to tools that will allow them to deliver engaging and meaningful lessons. All right, and that will set their students up for success, both in the classroom and beyond. The emphasis is on engaging and meaningful lessons. As a former teacher, I understand that sometimes you can find all types of content online, but that doesn't mean that it's useful to you, that it resonates with your students, that it's at all engaging. All right, and we're aiming to do that with these video lessons. And so how can we help? Well, we know that teachers need easy-to-use tools that support the fast pace of a modern classroom, and students depend on their teachers to help them gain the skills. Well, the short of that is that if the teachers don't have the resources they need, then we know that they can't help students and facilitate student learning. And so what we provide you, and we'll go through in this training, are full lesson plans, all right, to help you actually edit and implement the lessons we're proposing. The video-based curriculum walks your student through each and every activity we're asking them to do. And then you'll also receive a grading rubric as well as student examples for each lesson that you do. And so this is with differentiation in mind. This is allowing you to sort of judge the student project based on the level that they're at, and gives you the resources to hopefully incorporate this in a way that meets your needs. So lots of options here to help meet your needs. We'll go through each of these. Okay, and so when we think about how we integrate digital literacy into a classroom, it'd be great to think of applied digital skills as a bit of a magic wand, okay? And this magic wand can help you answer a few questions, and we're gonna go through a few of them in this session, but the first one is around timing, okay? And that big question for most teachers is, where in my existing curriculum planning can I add a digital skills resource to integrate into a unit that I'm already working with, something I'm already planning? Okay, and most of us, especially at this point in the year, are deep into the sort of projecting through the rest of the year to figure out, okay, what are students going to learn this year? All right, so one way to answer that question with applied digital skills is real simple. All right, you can go to the website, go to the curriculum page, and then filter by topic. All right, so if I do that right now, and I actually go to our curriculum page, I have this option to filter by an audience, filter by the application that I want to work with, and then filter by topic. If I select language arts, then I get 8 lessons that are geared towards language arts teachers. That's great. But actually, the truth of it is, we don't typically work backwards in that way. I think more likely, we'll start with something like this. Right, well, we know that in the first quarter of this year, I plan on, teaching personal narratives. And in the second quarter of this year, we're figuring out how to write, right? The big things like punctuation and spacing. I also know that my class is divided into lots of different levels. There's a reader's workshop. There's a vocabulary and language workshop. There's a writer's workshop. And we know, of course, in middle school and some of our lower grades, social studies and English language arts themes are blended. And so there are a lot of different ways you can approach this, but one thing that stands out to me is to take a look at your units and then figure out, hey, where can I incorporate digital skills? Where can I have a little bit of flexibility in the way that I approach this unit, okay? And so one that I've identified here is in my 4th quarter, I have my fiction unit. And some of the big ideas there are using the components of a story to talk about things like character, setting, dialogue, genre, etc. Right? Plot, we all know the parts of the story. And it's a pretty common English language arts lesson that scaffolds across grade levels. Okay, so we're going to take that as our baseline. And we're going to dive into the If-Then Adventure Stories lesson, which is one of our most popular lessons by far. All right, it's popular in homeroom classrooms, in English language arts classrooms, but actually it can be used across disciplines. And the practical life skill or academic skill that we're driving home here is just what we discussed, right? Parts of a story, storyboarding. And the way this lesson is presented, it's actually going to dive into group decision making too, so that we're collaborating on, hey, what's the story going to actually be? If you take a look at the graphic on the screen, you can see this is actually a sort of modern day choose your own adventure. All right, where the students create hyperlinks on different paths that the character can take in a plot. All right, and when you click on one, then a plot twist occurs, right? The plot advances and the next thing happens. So if, you are at the lodge and then you select the option to walk, then you're going to go somewhere than if you select the option to drive, okay? And how the characters and setting changes as a result of that is something that students can digest as they're working through it. Okay, so this is just a starting point. I want to show you how we're going to plan for this lesson, but before we do that, let's just take a quick look at how this actually shows up in the classroom, okay? We know that this lesson, as we see at the top, is scheduled for about 2 to 3 hours, but what does it look like? We're actually going to take a look at Amanda, who is a 7th grade teacher, and how she integrated digital skill lessons into her English class. So some of the first steps before we actually get this in front of our students is to go through the videos yourself and complete the lessons yourself as a student. And you already had a chance to take a look at what it looks like to sign in from the student perspective. So you can do this yourself. Next thing, she actually downloaded the lesson plans and began to customize them herself. And then she uploaded them into Google Classroom, or rather, she assigned the lesson for her students via Google Classroom. And there are lots of steps documented in our Applied Digital Skills Help Center that outlines how we can do that. The last thing she did is, I thought was really smart. She actually tested the lesson out with one class before she did it with her other classes. And I think we all know what that looks like. We know our strong class that sort of we have a rapport with, their time on task, they understand what needs to happen. And so if a lesson isn't, fully baked, we can perhaps try it with them and just see how they react, understand, hey, what are some of the technology hurdles we might encounter in that classroom? And so that way, when we get our difficult class or our 7th period class at the end of the day, we understand sort of how this is supposed to work, right? We can go back to the drawing board, refine the lesson, and then teach it to them, okay? And so, of course, you can take any of these steps to begin to integrate this into your classroom. But on day one, when we're introducing a lesson, we're going to take a look at what that could possibly look like, all right? And so we're going to take a look at that teacher modeling this lesson introduction right now.
All right, guys, we're going to pick up with the planning an event today. We're going to do a little jumping around, which I know that some of you aren't too activity for, which is where we're going to pick up today for creating a logo. But I think this is a really nice activity for you guys to work together on. You're each going to have your own individual logo when you're done, but I want you to work with a partner, whether it's the person beside you or the person that you originally started with as a partner, to get some feedback on what your logo looks like. You don't have to have already built it. If you're not to that point yet, that's okay. Everybody already has an idea of what your activity is that you're planning. So that's really all you need at this point to be able to create this. And you're going to use Google Draw to create this in. We did the portraits in Draw, so this goes right along with that, using some of those advanced features, because you can do a lot more with Draw than what we first realized, right? So activity 4 is where you're going to jump to. Before you jump to working with your partners, I want you to watch video 1 and 2. It's going to take you about 8 minutes to do that. The first one's about 3 minutes long, the second one's about 5 minutes. But those are the two that give you really nice information on what a logo is and how to build one. So I want you to watch those 2 videos. If you've already built your logo and you're already to that point, when your partner gets to that point, if they're not there yet, just get some feedback from them. What can be better? The product that we first make is not always our best product. There's always things that we can do to improve that. So take a few minutes, watch those videos. Once you're done with those, pair up and start building the logo that's going to represent your event. So it's going to be your own individualized logo. Okay? Questions? Yeah. Headphones in the back if you want to grab a pair. Okay, then I will bring a pair to you. Any other questions? No, we're good.
Awesome. So you guys saw how the teacher sort of walked through and set the class up there. I think the next important thing to really go through is just sort of what this actually looks like. And how did she even know what to say there? Okay, and so we know that first step is going through the lessons themselves first. And you can start with this first video, right? It's going to be an intro lesson.
Hey, I'm Kumar. Initially, you'll learn how to collaborate to tell an interactive story. In an interactive story, the reader acts as the main character and decides the plot of the story.
Okay, so first thing I noticed here in watching this video, lots of useful information. The video itself is actually way too fast, right? And I know that my English language learners, for instance, they're not going to be able to keep up with that. And so I'm going to scroll down and adjust the playback speed. Or maybe change it to slow or normal. All right, I have the option to do that. Additionally, if I don't necessarily want to sit through the whole video, I have a sense of how long it's going to take. All right, about a little under a minute. And then I have a transcript of exactly what's being said here. All right, and so I understand, okay, this is how the lesson is expected to flow. But if I want to get a sense of the specific timing and sort of how I want to lay this out, one thing I should do is go to my lesson plan in the bottom left-hand corner. All right, this is going to open up a Google Doc for us, and you'll see, let's get a better version here. My favorite part is that I have the option to save a copy to Google Drive in the top right-hand corner. So as soon as I click that, it makes a copy of this that I can modify and edit on my own. I don't have to stick with the exact lesson plan that Google provides me. All right. Moving along, as I keep going through this, what's really cool is I get my learning objectives right up front. Okay, I get the total duration, that I'm expecting the lesson to take, the materials that I'm going to need. Of course, I'm going to need a computer with internet access per student, headphones per student. They'll probably need a Google account if they're going to actually complete the activity, because they're going to be using tools that require a login like Google Docs, Google Sheets and Slides, for instance. But this is my favorite part right here. We get to the outline of the lesson. Okay, and in this outline, I actually have the title of the section that I'm working on, okay, the Google Apps Overview and the lesson intro, all right? And so I know that that is this introduction here, as well as just the introduction that we just watched, right? How long is that all gonna take? It's gonna take about 15 minutes for me to queue up the video, have it projected in the front of the room, or have students access the site on their individual machines, right? Me tell them what's happening, and then have them watch that first video to understand, hey, this is the assignment I'm starting. That's going to take about 15 minutes. Then when I actually start to brainstorm story ideas, okay, I can see that that section is here. And there are 3 videos and a wrap-up activity associated with it. Okay, it's going to require some group decision-making, some brainstorming for story elements. That's going to take more time. Right, and I know here it tells me 45 to 70 minutes. Students are collaborating with group members to brainstorm, select setting, character, and problems for an interactive story. Then I'm creating the interactive story. All right, that's 70 to 95 minutes. So I get the sense here that, yeah, I'm not going to do this lesson in a single class period. It's probably going to span across, multiple class periods. But if this is my outline for the week, then I have an idea of exactly what I need to do to prep for the lesson. Right, I have an idea of sort of which skill is going to be covered in each concept. All right, I have an idea of ideal student outcomes, etc. I can go through all of that. The best part is the rubric, all right, that I can click here to open. That's going to open up a spreadsheet, and in the spreadsheet, we get a sense of the components that we're actually going to grade this assignment on. Okay, so on their ideas, okay, in a beginner version of this project, they may share 5 ideas for the setting, the character, and the problem that they're about to build out. And maybe that is, just what I need them to do to grasp this concept. But for an exemplary version, maybe they're categorizing 10 or more ideas across settings, characters, and the problems they face, right? And so we get a sense of, sort of what exemplary work looks like, what developing work looks like, accomplished beginning in terms of our level of performance here. Then we can also rate them on their digital acumen here. So did they create a title slide? Are they linking the slides correctly? How many slides did they produce? They just produced 5? Okay, maybe that's okay for a beginner. They produced 10 or more. Well, yeah, I would expect that in an exemplary example. And if I want to get a sense of what an exemplary project looks like, I have links to it right here. Okay, so I'm actually going to click on that, and that's going to show me sort of what the ideal student project would look like. Okay, yeah, that they have these different options hyperlinked, and I can click from one to get to slide 4, and that tells me what my next decision is, right? And I can go through the story as if I was actually participating in some real way. I understand that they've created a cohesive story, and it's formatted correctly. It looks really nice, right? And so in this one activity, I'm able to talk about the parts of the story and get them to create a beautiful presentation with hyperlinks and images and formatted fonts. And these are the digital skills that they'll need going into the rest of middle school and high school. So one example of sort of what we're doing there, building out a lesson. So if you haven't done it yet, make sure you're on g.co/applydigitalskills.com so you can follow along, take some of these actions as well. Hopefully you are there yourself by now. Okay, great. So we're going back to our magic wand, and this magic wand again solves problems with applied digital skills. And so besides timing, all right, and finding when we can sort of fit applied digital skills or digital literacy at all into something we're already planning, there are also things that we have to do, okay? The requirements. And so sometimes I take a step back and I think, which state standards or existing school objectives do do I want or need to address with digital skills? Okay, so there are a few different ways these show up. Sometimes they show up like this, right? And I know that in November, I have a literacy standard that I need to cover, all right, to produce, expand, rearrange compound sentences, all right? And that's the standard I have to meet by the state, okay? And so that's a point where I can say, maybe there's a way I can address this with digital skills, all right? Other times it shows up like this, okay? I'm joining you from Michigan today, and we have specific integrated technology competency standards, okay? And the idea here is to focus on building basic technology skills. Whenever I can show that my students have proficiency in these skills, then I'm making progress towards these competency goals. Okay, so how do I actually do that? Well, actually, one way we can do it is actually by going back to the site in our curriculum page. So I showed you earlier that we can filter by the audience type or the topic and pick English language arts. I can also filter by state standard, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead and select my state. I'm gonna select Michigan, just like the example I showed you. And I told you that I taught 6th, 7th, and 9th grade English language arts. So I'm gonna select the 7th grade. And then a list of those standards are in the drop-down menu. I encourage you to test this yourself. You can't see it all on my screen, but a list of the standards, specifically the Michigan Education Technology Standards, are showing. And so I'm going to select this one around research and information literacy. All right, there are more drop-downs on the specific skill, but I'm just going to actually go with this broader standard and see that there are 5 lessons that align directly with Michigan's standards for 7th graders on researching information literacy. Wow, the fact that I can just literally search for the standard and find a lesson to match it makes it super easy for me to do this. So the first lesson that comes up is research and developing a topic. All right, and so I've been on the English language arts side of things, but this is really speaking to our social studies teachers, right? This is speaking to our history teachers and also English language arts, but this idea of researching and developing a topic is really specific to those areas that allow us to think about the world and researching past events or current events. And so that leads me to think about one of my favorite lessons, which is research and developing a topic. All right, and like we said, it is popular in language arts classes, but also social studies classes, current events, activities, etc. All right, and the practical life skill that we're looking at is identifying credible online sources to make an interactive research document. All right, so just the basics, right? Like, how do I know that this isn't fake news? How do I know that this is a credible source that I can include in a research document? So the digital application that we need in order to complete this is actually quite complex, right? 25 years ago, we might have told students to go to the library and to cite their sources, using all types of things. But here, they need to know how to search the internet. They need to know how to format documents. They need to know how to link their research effectively, all of those things that you kind of see going on in this graphic here. And so if I want to check that lesson out, I can go back to the page and I can, see this is going to take me 3 to 4 hours. I see the exact Michigan standard alignment. Okay, I see the apps that it's going to cover. A little bit of abstract here. So even, sort of tech teachers can apply this if they need to. There's some coding involved. But by clicking to the lesson, I can actually see it's pretty complex. It's multi-layered. Lesson 3 is all around coding. Maybe that's not something I'm going to foray in. And so I know that my students are actually just going to do these first 5 videos on testing for credibility, all right? Understanding how to select a topic, understanding how to share and evaluate articles, credibility checks, credibility clues. Then they're going to go into lesson 2, which is exploring a topic with research and collaboration. How to choose the research topic, all right? How to search the internet for the right information, how to record your research notes, how to write that intro paragraph about your topic, and how to wrap up researching the topic. Okay, again, this is something that is its own unit typically in a classroom. We spend time going through each and every one of these, but these are videos right? Each of which are, I don't know, 2 minutes in length that the student can watch over and over again. The other thing I love about this, and we really don't get a chance to see it, well, you see it a little bit here, is so we're screen sharing in these videos, right? Which means that we show students exactly what steps they need to replicate on their screen. It's not just a talking head. And so that's super useful in terms of modeling what students need to do. In the right-hand corner of the screen, you see the student has instructions for this activity. All right, so this little clip lets us know that students can submit work as a part of the activity. All right. In students submitting work, that allows you to go to your teacher dashboard in My Classes to confirm that they've submitted that work. Okay, if you want to learn more about that, definitely visit our Applied Digital Skills Help Center. But these instructions outline, hey, you're going to create a blank document and name it Research Notes. And you're going to choose the topic and type it at the top of your document. That's the first steps that they're going to take for this part of the activity, and then they're going to go on to the next videos, right? Or just hit this next button. That's going to tell them exactly what steps to take after that. Okay. Remember, I can always go back to my rubric and see the levels of performance here, and I can link to a beginning project. And okay, this person, they don't have a title on the document. They have this one paragraph on how to make a post go viral. Okay, I guess that's what they were researching, and a little bit of formatting. Okay, so that's the basic version of this. Let's look at an average version. They have a title at the top. Okay, they have that intro paragraph. They have a header. They have links. They have notes. They have highlights. They have bolds. They have quotes. They have other sort of notes for themselves, perhaps that relate to the topic. And again, maybe this is just the basic sort of note-taking stage that you want students to begin with before they create the presentation or before they write the actual report. But rather than you having to sort of explain this and show one big presentation on it to all students, you can allow students to look at these videos at their own pace and get a sense of how it works. Or you can project it in front of the class and go through it with them together. So again, whatever works there to sort of bridge that gap. Another thing in the area of research and writing is the research and writing lesson. You can see the difference. This lesson is 5 to 10 hours, whereas the last one was, where were we? Yeah, 3 to 5. So a little bit different. This one's more advanced, right? It goes into the actual writing and revision of the research paper. Okay, so the first step is maybe how do we do some of that initial research, get the notes, etc. Now we're talking about how do we write that research paper, the life skills, researching on the internet, evaluating sources, drafting and publishing findings, the digital applications, document formatting, okay? If you look at that bottom right-hand corner, you see digital collaboration. Okay, and so we've talked to teachers who've had a blast with this and that they've created maybe a small group of students who are maybe researching the same topic, or paired students up who are researching different topics. And what you see down here is that there's students who are commenting on parts of each other's document here. Okay, so rather than, geez, us having to write your first draft on paper, hand it to your neighbor, have them mark it up with red marker, and then you go home and make the revisions, and then you bring it back the next day and your next neighbor does the second round of edits. We don't have to do that anymore, right? We're beyond that, and that's not the world your students are living in either. So we can create this document, share it with another classmate, and have them go ahead and comment directly on their feedback and making those edits. All right, so those aspects of digital collaboration, digital publishing is something that we want students to know about as well. And that's why we're doing this. Okay. Really quickly, we're going to go through a quick video of what sort of the on-the-ground teaching of applied digital skills look like. Okay, so you saw this teacher go ahead and introduce the lesson. Now we're going to see sort of what does she do during the lesson as it's taking place.
so you're trying to get it to cross out when it needs a certain date, right? All right, so if we say date is before, then click it, and then you can fill in the rest of your stuff. So that's why I have to do A4 through C51 should be plenty since you did that. So date is before. And what dates do you have there? 97, 98, 99. It actually is working. See how yours are crossed out? Where it's got the line through the 97, 98, 99. That's exactly what you told it to do. You said the dates before today, you wanted it a strike through, which is what this is called. So then you can say done, or you can add another rule. So if you wanted it to strike through and also make it red, so that you know it's done, or you wanted to put a highlight behind it instead of making the font a different color, you can do that. But it's whatever makes it easy for you to read. Is the goal of the conditional formatting.
Okay, so that was an example of a lesson that has nothing to do with English and social studies. She was teaching conditional formatting, but you saw that she peeked in from time to time to work with the student, right? To let them know, hey, this is how you should be doing this, or you're on the right track, or yeah, actually, the reason you do this is so you can do that. And while she was doing that, the other students were still working, right? Either with their headphones on or collaborating or et cetera. So there are definitely some blended learning opportunities with this curriculum, especially if you have access to the tech in order to get it done, okay? So last big skill that our Magic Wand is going to provide for us. So I may use my Magic Wand to address timing and when I can incorporate digital skills. I may use my Magic Wand to meet a requirement from my school or from my state standards. I'm also going to use my Magic Wand to just build on the skills of my students, okay? What are the basic skills that my students already have that digital skills can help my students enhance? All right, so those are things I'm thinking about. What are skills that my students have or need that this digital skill can help them enhance? All right, so the first thing that comes to mind, especially if I am a social studies teacher or current events, that it was one of my favorite activities as a student to do my weekly current events report and as a teacher as well. And so, you know, it's great because it, you know, has students do research, but also they're analyzing what's happening in the world around them. Okay, and so we have a lesson on technology's role in current events that we found lots of teachers rave about because that is the question of the hour, right? And we see in this activity, it actually has them pick a few topics. The world of online gaming is one example there. And so there's something for, you know, all students to find, you know, a topic that they're interested in. Self-driving vehicles in the future of automation. Things like password and personal security, being a good digital citizen, wearable technology, right? I'm positive that there's something in here your students are going to jump at and say, oh, that's really interesting, right? How can I connect a current event to this topic and the role of technology in it? So the digital skill that we're looking at is communicating information and research by using Google Search, Google Docs, Google Sites, and Google Slides. And the practical life skill, of course, is how you do analyze current events and communicate those findings. So really straightforward. Another use that builds on skills that students already have is to create a presentation about a topic. Okay, and so we've heard of this going a number of different ways by teachers who've remixed these lessons. This is popular across subjects, right? And so the most basic skill that the students have are, you know, the basic presentation, the standard show and tell as it exists in kindergarten, and then what that evolves to across grades. And so really being able to teach students how to use PowerPoint, or the PowerPoint equivalent in this case, right, Google Slides, to create a presentation is huge, right? They're learning how to format, they're learning how to share research, they're learning how to design slides, things they'll definitely use throughout their time in academia. So this can be applied across all sorts of things. One of my favorite lessons that's been remixed, and I've really heard some extremely creative ideas from teachers about this, is the create a resume in Google Docs lesson. Now, we're talking about practical skills or basic skills that students already have or skills they may need in the future. So even removed from our social studies and ELA context, we know that our middle schoolers, our high schoolers, our early adults, they're going to be applying for jobs, right, sooner than later. So helping them learn how to create a resume that stands out, work on digital collaboration, document formatting, etc. with Google Docs is huge, right? This is something they can take away with them and use in the outside world. But besides that, I've heard of social studies teachers having students create a resume for a person in history, right? What is Dr. Martin Luther King's resume? Based off of everything that you know about him, right? Based off the things that we've read. What is the resume of King Louis? You know, talk about the things that he has accomplished. What are his skills? What is his experience level? Using this resume as a way of understanding figures in history. Likewise, I've seen teachers do that on the language arts side with a character in a book, right? Tell me what experience Scout has, right? That makes her a good investigator. You know, what experience does whatever character bring to our story, right? What are their skills? What steps have they taken? And so there are lots of ways to remix this, but at the most basic level, you're harping digital skills, right? In terms of like, how do you format a resume? What is this? And it's something students are going to use outside of your classroom. So this is a good way to integrate it. I've also seen teachers, sort of from a homeroom perspective, use this lesson to have students apply for classroom jobs. That was one of the more interesting ones I heard recently with students in the lower level, but it was a blast, right? Because they got to sort of write out, hey, why do I, deserve to, take care of passing out papers? My skills are, well, I am a good listener, I am efficient, right? I am cheerful, right? All the things that you would want in someone who's passing out your papers. And so it's your classroom, right? Think of all the ways that you can introduce this curriculum in a way that's fun and meaningful and engaging, like we discussed to start. Okay, very quickly, we're going to give you an example of sort of what the collaboration, the redirection, the feedback aspect of this looks like, right? We know that all classrooms aren't going to flow perfectly, but this is a video of sort of how a teacher addresses a student who might be a little bit off track.
Hey, McKay. Hey, McKay. I was pretty much at the same point. He needs to get feedback. And since you're at that point too, if you guys want to pair up to give each other feedback on what looks good and what you need to work on. Okay. Simply because he's at the same point that you are, so it'd be a good time to give feedback to each other.
Okay. So that teacher recognizes, oh great, I have two students who are at the same part of the lesson. Let's go ahead and get them working together. So pretty straightforward. Again, the goal of this entire session was to talk about how we can integrate the Applied Digital Skills curriculum into your English Language Arts and Social Studies classes. And so at this time, I'd really encourage you to take the time to explore the curriculum. I just highlighted a few lessons that we know are successful with our English Language Arts teachers and our social studies teachers. They've given us tons of feedback on them, but we would love to see sort of what you can add to this. So identify a lesson that could be useful for your students and think about where it fits, right? Is there a particular time of year when you're covering a unit that addresses this? How it fits, right? What does this look like in your classroom? Is it a one-to-one computer situation? Will you have headphones for each student? Why it fits, okay? Maybe you're doing a resume to teach students about, a character in history or a character in a novel you're reading, but maybe it's also because they're applying for summer jobs soon, right? Or you want them to apply to colleges this coming fall. So think about that, sort of how can we incorporate digital skills that students will take with them outside the classroom in order to be able to succeed in a 21st century workplace or in academia. If you can integrate those in a few places throughout the year, then your students will be on the right track. Okay, when we think about what we learned from this session, or just when you go back and review the curriculum on your own, talk to other teachers about it. But more importantly, think to yourself, why is this lesson interesting to me? What value does it bring to my students? And what's a lesson that I could use during the first semester of school, right, to make it easy? Right? What's something I can do to put digital literacy into practice immediately? What's something I can do during our testing period, right? When my students are done and they need something else to do, right? What's something I can do towards the end of the year when my standard curriculum is wrapped up and I want to find ways to integrate digital skills, right? So if you're not finding ways during the school year to sort of systematically integrate it into the curriculum, what are the other spots where it can fit? And just supplement what you're already doing. But we know digital literacy is super important for our students to be successful in the future. And that's why it's important to folks like us at Google. I thank you so much for joining us today. I want to give you a list of resources where you can address your questions. Obviously, we want you to go to g.co/apply digital skills, sign in, create a teacher account, do all the things if you haven't done it already. And our full curriculum is accessible there. There are posters for you to download for your classroom. There's a basic literacy guide if your students are going to need help with things like keyboarding and just the bare minimum. All of that's there. And so it's free, and we hope you take advantage of it. If you go to g.co/apply digital skills /K through, or just K-12, the letter K and then 12 guide, you'll get our curriculum guide, right? And so we outline a few sample learning paths where you can actually get a sense of how you might integrate this into your classroom, a few lessons that apply to whatever your subject is or whatever goals you have for your students. The Apply Digital Skills Help Center is the third resource here that's set up, right? How do you actually do this in your classroom step by step? Troubleshooting, answers any questions on issues you might encounter. And then there's a contact us form. So if you have any questions at all, we have curriculum specialists on call who are ready to answer your questions, whether they be highly technical or very specific to the content you're teaching. So please reach out to us. Last two things I wanted to make sure I highlight. Whether you're on the website or our Help Center, you'll see a section on the G Suite certification. It's the student certification exam that we just launched in the summer of 2019, and it is amazing because it is the first opportunity for students to go ahead and actually gain certification that they can share with potential employers that signals that they have the skills to operate in a 21st century workplace, right? They know all of G Suite. They know how to use Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, Gmail, all those things effectively, right? Those are the things that we're hoping our students gauge from taking these lessons. And we've also designed a full set of lessons that teach to this G Suite certification exam. And so if that is something that's of interest to you or your school, please go ahead and look that up. And you can use Apply Digital Skills to try and prepare for that exam, right? To get them familiar with the applications and what they may be tested on in that exam setting. So last thing I want to share is g.co/apply digital skills /DIY. All right, and DIY stands for do it yourself. If you know other teachers who can benefit from a training like this, obviously feel free to refer them to this webinar, but you can go to that website I just provided and get access to training materials so that you can go into your district or your community or just the teacher down the hall, right, and share the resources that they might need to incorporate digital learning into their classroom. We believe that this gospel is spread through educators who are doing the work, not just through us. And so if you go to that site, you get all the materials you need to teach this to someone else. Okay. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Again, go to our Help Center and contact us directly if you have any questions, and we hope to see you again sometime soon. Thanks for tuning in.